Good evening and welcome to Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, we have a terrific show for you. All politics, of course, in this election season, starting out tonight with another of the mayoral contenders in this fall's municipal election. Of course, now with the signatures certified, looks like an even baker's dozen running for Mayor Menino's seat. And tonight you'll meet Bill Walczak, he of the former CEO, head of the Codman Square Health Center, currently vice president for Shawmut Design and Construction. He threw his hat in early and banking on building an organization and a name for himself to make it through to the preliminary and on to the final election. We'll hear from him. Then in the second half, we'll shift our focus to next week's special U.S. Senate race. That's right, joining us, Republican Gabe Gomez talks about his, what many see as a long shot candidacy, yet he easily won the Republican primary, and polls show him close enough that he could pull off perhaps another upset. All right, we're back with Talk of the Neighborhoods. Tonight, a two-part show, but all politics and two terrific guests. Starting off this first half with another of the mayoral contenders for this fall's municipal elections. Of course, Mayor Menino announcing earlier this spring that he will not be running for another term. It has set off a sprint amongst a dozen candidates, all of whom have now made the ballot and going forward. And joining me, pleased to have on a gentleman who's shown some very bright promise over the years, especially out of Dorchester neighborhood, Codman Square in particular, where he was the one of the founders and CEO of the Codman Square Health Center, now a large nonprofit serving that neighborhood, since moved on and now vice president at Shawmut Design and Construction. We're talking, of course, about Bill Walczak. And Bill, nice to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us and jumping in. We've seen a lot of politicians jump into this, but not too many CEOs of nonprofits. And, I think early on, a lot of talk that why not somebody like New York, like a Bloomberg. Of course, he's a billionaire, and it'd be a nice thought if you were. But you seem to offer a lot of the same types of bright ideas, big ideas, bold ideas. What makes you think you can catch on and win this race?
Well, for one thing, first of all, I want to remind you that it was on this show a couple of months ago where you asked me if I might be interested in running for mayor, and I didn't say no. I said, in fact, who wouldn't want to be mayor of Boston? And, the reality is, who wouldn't want to? The mayor of Boston is just such an important position. If you care about our neighborhoods and you want to make a difference, there's no better position to be in. You can impact the education system, the safety, public safety. There's so many things you can do as mayor. So what makes me think I can actually do a good job and be mayor? Well, I've done a good job over the years. I've been involved, as you know, in many things, starting up many things. I was the co-founder of 2 schools in Boston, actually, in addition to the Codman Square Health Center, which I ran for 36 years. And I've also been involved in public safety and parks in so many of the different aspects of the city of Boston. So even though I haven't run for office before, I've been engaged in all sorts of different things that make a difference in the city. And I think it's time for people like me to get in the race and to make a dramatic statement about what the city of Boston can be.
Now, when you first talked to your wife about this, your kids, did they immediately want to check your temperature, test you? No, seriously. It's a huge commitment. It's enormous.
Believe me, it's a huge commitment. But what's interesting is that people remind me all the time that 20, even 30 years ago, when people would approach me and say, geez, you're doing a great job out here in Codman Square. You're doing a great job doing this or that. what would you really want to be? And I would always say mayor of Boston. I mean, that's what I would say. You know, it's just you look
It's good to be king.
Yeah, well, not necessarily king, but you can do a lot of things.
You
and,
can.
You know, and
it's a strong mayor form of government here. In
Yes,
many ways, a mayor here has more responsibility, power than in a lot of other major cities.
Oh, absolutely. And you can have a dramatic impact on public safety, on education, on healthcare. You can do all sorts of things. You can also bring innovation into the city in a deep way. I mean, Tom Menino, we all know, has been a great mayor of the city. And 20 years ago, the city of Boston was less of a city than it is today. The city of Boston's growing, the economy's growing. Being at Shaw Design and Construction, I know that there's $4.5 billion worth of construction going on in the city right now. And if you look at that kind of impact, people wanting to be here, there's so much more we can do to make the city of Boston a great, even greater city than it is right now. And I want to be part of that. I want to do it.
Well, of course, and you mentioned all the development going forward. A couple of things come to mind, and I'm sure you've been reading. There was a piece in Boston Magazine recently about doing away with the BRA and changing how the city approaches development, everything from permitting to zoning to planning. How would you do it? Would you do it the same way, or would you do it differently?
I would do it differently. I mean, as a long-time activist in Dorchester, I can tell you that we have had our problems with the Boston Redevelopment Authority. I don't think that the Boston Redevelopment Authority is completely broken. I think what we need to do is we need to rethink it. You know, how does the Boston Redevelopment Authority do development and planning at the same time? I think that's the conundrum of the Boston Redevelopment Authority. It operates on its own budget. It's separate from the city of Boston's budget, and it needs development dollars in order to be able to sustain itself. So its focus has been very much, I think, too much in the area of development and not enough on planning. If we were able to take the developable parcels of the city of Boston, the different areas of the city where we want to see things happen, new development happen, and rethink it as a strategy of looking at, how do we get our community members together with the business community, with the institutions that may or may not be there, and be able to come up with a master plan for the area, we're going to be able to get everyone engaged and everyone involved in the decision for it. So just to give you an example, over at Columbia Point, we had a 1.5-year planning process, maybe even 2 years actually, planning process that included the Boston Redevelopment Authority and the institutions and the businesses. And we came up with a plan for the Columbia Point area that was vetted by the community and by the business and academic institutions over there. And so when the first proposals came up, the community had already decided where they wanted housing and where they wanted commercial development. So those projects are going forward very quickly. We can do quicker development if we engage the community early, create a master plan, change the zoning based on the master plan, and move forward. Right now, we don't do enough planning.
Why is that?
Because if you read the Boston Magazine article, they'll say that they wait for the developers to come up with the plans and they figure out how it fits in.
Right.
And that's just not good planning for the city. Every other city does a much bigger job of planning, and we need to join the rest of them to make sure that we're getting what we need in the city of Boston. And in addition to that, how the city of Boston's development projects wind up impacting the overall neighborhood, whether we need new schools. We're building a lot of housing in downtown Boston. We obviously, if we're going to be attracting families there, and we are attracting families, we need more schools in that area.
There's been some suggestion, of course, a lot has been made of development, especially in the South Boston Seaport now, Fort Point Channel, downtown, mixed-use housing down there. Have the needs of the neighborhoods have been kind of shunted aside in your mind?
Well, my view is that there's a development process that for in our neighborhoods that we need to be able to take into consideration what people want, what people don't want, but also what's needed by the city of Boston. I'm a big supporter of transit-oriented development, and I want to be able to see more density and more housing, especially because we have a serious housing crisis in Boston, around transit stations, because that'll be a way that we can avoid also having to clog our streets with even more
smart
cars.
growth.
Right, absolutely smart growth. The downtown area, the Innovation District, the areas of downtown Boston, we're seeing the old combat zone being developed. Those areas have a different process because these are much bigger developments. There's a 600-foot tall building going in by Government Center Garage. That's a completely different type of development than we're going to likely see in our neighborhoods. And as a result, what we need to do is make sure that we have different kinds of processes for different areas of the neighborhood of the city of Boston. And I'd like to see the downtown area continue its growth, because when it grows, the downtown area growing and these new buildings going in, what it's doing, it's creating jobs. And what we need to do is make sure that jobs are available for the people that are coming out of our neighborhoods. And that's going to happen in our downtown areas.
And then there'll be more development. Again, Bill Walczak, one of the candidates running for mayor of the city of Boston, here tonight on Talking the Neighborhoods. He is, of course, well known, especially in Dorchester, as one of the founders and the CEO of the Codman Square Health Center. Also has started a charter school there and another school as well. Currently vice president for design for development and
Shawmut Design and Construction.
Shawmut Design and Construction. Thanks for picking me up there.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, of course, you're working. You made your mark, cut your teeth as a neighborhood activist. Now you're working for a developer. Has that colored your view of things? Changed how you look at the world? There's some suggestion that Mayor Menino, for instance, was too chummy with developers, and I'm not suggesting that to you, but how does that, does it change how you looked at things?
Well, I mean, first of all, Shawmut is a construction company. It's a construction management company. It does a lot of construction jobs. It's not actually a developer.
Right.
But what it's done is allowed me to see closer how downtown development occurs and how development occurs in the neighborhood. So one of the projects being done right now by Shawmut is the Ferdinand Building in Dudley Square.
Right.
And I have
New school department headquarters.
And I have a direct role in that. And one of the most important things we can do with these development projects is to make sure that we get as many people from our neighborhoods, people of color and women, engaged in construction. And that's one of the things that I've been monitoring for Shawmut. And Shawmut's done a great job because it's focused attention on making sure that we're achieving the goals of the residency, the Boston Jobs Residency Program. And I know that we can do a better job across the city of making sure not only that we're employing our residents and people of color and women, but also that we can make sure that this happens across the board. What's important is if you focus attention on this issue of making sure that we're getting residents out of our neighborhoods these jobs, it happens. But what we also need to do is we need to completely revamp the way we look at how we're creating jobs for people. So in our educational system, we have Madison Park, and there was an article in the Globe today about how Madison Park is failing. That should be a major source of jobs for kids coming out of our neighborhoods to get into construction. Those jobs pay really well. Being an electrician, a plumber, putting sheetrock up, are really good jobs. What we have to do is we have to revamp our high schools to make sure that what we're doing is we're doing a workforce development aspect of it so that we can work with the business community, and that's something I've learned by being at Shawmut, working with the business community to be able to make sure that we have pipelines into jobs that are being created in Boston.
But that's a good example, and I mean, not that it's about pointing fingers, but who dropped the ball? I mean, why is it that, and they had basically, it's not the same kind of thing, but at Roxbury Community College, they had an opportunity to hook up with some companies around training programs, didn't do it as well. Who ultimately is responsible? And I mean, you were just on the committee on looking at school choice. Do we look at the school department, or does the buck ultimately come back to Mayor Menino on things like this?
Well, obviously, the mayor appoints the school committee. The school committee appoints the superintendents. The superintendents is responsible for the quality of the leadership in the schools. And we do have good schools in our Boston public school system. We do have good schools. Obviously, we've fallen down in some areas, and we have a number of schools that doesn't have the kind of leadership that's necessary to make sure that our schools are working. I've talked to teachers across the system, and pretty much everybody is in agreement that the most important position to hire inside of a school is the principal. And if we're able to get really good principals, headmasters in there, we can see schools turn around. I've talked to teachers who've said that they've seen schools go 180 degrees in the opposite direction with just the change of leadership in schools. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we have the best leadership possible, the inspirational leaders who can build a team of teachers that's able to accomplish goals and knows what their goals are, and also be I would want to see more of the responsibility to be in the schools rather than in the school department. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the right kind of leadership in the schools, building the right kind of teams, and then hold those schools accountable for the delivery of the services, the education, and be able to make sure that the outcomes are good.
Now, the mayor and school committee as well has talked about hiring a new superintendent,
Yes.
But essentially what that would do would be tie the hands of his successor. Do you think that's a good idea? And
No. I think we have a great interim superintendent right now, and I think we ought to wait until after the election. The election's going to be just a few months from now. And it would be great to be able to have the new mayor. Obviously, so many of the mayoral candidates are talking about education, and I firmly believe that education is the most important issue this year that we need to resolve in the process of this campaign. But it's really important, therefore, that the new mayor be able to have a really strong role and be simpatico, shall we say, with the new superintendent of schools.
is there a risk? I mean, is there a chance you might inherit the mayor's political machine? Is there a risk inherent in? Well, this guy is shown to have somewhat thin skin, even slightly criticizing him. Is there a political risk in that for Bill Walczak? And you've been good friends with the mayor for a number of years.
I think the mayor's been a great mayor. I mean, let's face it, the city of Boston is in a much better place today. People are really proud of the city. They're impressed by and optimistic about the future. Everywhere I go, people are very optimistic about the future of Boston. So, no, I mean, I think Tom Menino brought us to a great place. The big question for this campaign is what is the next level for the city of Boston and how do we get there? How do we employ technology to democratize more of the decision-making processes of our city?
And why do you think you can do a better job at that than the others running?
Because I've done it. I mean, I'm a person who's accomplished a great deal. I started and ran a community health center, a $25 million agency that not only did healthcare, but also engaged people in the earned income tax credit, financial literacy programs, exercise, adult education, and then built a school inside of it to prove that what we can do with our educational system is introduce young people to the possibility of health careers. The number one way that a child growing up in Boston can go from being low income to the middle class is by becoming a health professional. Why? Because 18% of the jobs in Boston are in healthcare. And being a health professional is a middle class level job. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're trying these innovative things to be able to get more of our kids, the kids coming out of our neighborhoods, into the jobs that are going to make them successful. That's something that I was able to do. I also I was the co-founder of the Edward Kennedy Health Careers Academy, another similar school, but inside the district. It's a pilot school. Also with the goal of getting more kids from Boston into health careers. We can do that across the board. We can do it in a much bigger way, but what we need is the kind of leadership that's going to do that.
Well, you're running against people that have had their name on the ballot, have been self-promoting themselves for years and years and years. Tell me the calculus. How does Bill Walczak break through that? Clearly you're a very bright, talented man, but how do you kind of get over on these guys who are been working the streets for years, so to speak?
Well, a lot of it, frankly, is the old-fashioned way of just shoe leather, going out into the neighborhoods, knocking on doors, going to hundreds of meet and greets, what we call, and just being out there. Part of that is that. Part of it's being on this show, frankly. I know you have a large number of people that watch this show, and they want to see what these new faces are doing there. Part of it is being the new face. I'm a guy with fresh perspectives. I know about things that many of the other candidates don't know. I have a record of accomplishment, and I think people will be interested in knowing that somebody who has been able to accomplish a great deal, who knows how to manage large budgets, is going to be able to be a candidate for City of Boston. Let's face it, the City of Boston is a big, big company. It is a $2.6 billion entity with over 16,000 employees. It's really important that that entity is well managed. And that's something that I can actually point to and prove that I'm a very, very good manager and a very good leader that knows how to get these things done. I think that matters to people in the City of Boston. And I'm hoping that that's something that will resonate with the voters. And they'll see that, hey, here's a guy that's accomplished a lot, who knows how to run things. He'll be a good mayor.
Well, of course, there's been talk. We've got just a couple minutes left here, but for a long time because this city's been run by the Irish and now an Italo-American for 20 plus years. That the time has come. We elected an African-American governor. We elected an African-American president, but we've never had a person of color as the mayor of the city of Boston. You're a little pale-faced. Does that put you at a disadvantage, though? How do you deal with that issue? I'm sure it comes up.
It does come up, and the fact that I've worked most of my life in neighborhood of color, I think makes me a candidate that really understands the issues across the city of Boston. I'm a person who, let's face it, I created the Codman Square Health Center, Codman Academy, and co-founded Codman Academy in the Kennedy Health Careers Academy. Those are institutions that largely serve people of color. I've devoted my life to making sure that the city of Boston is a great place for everyone who lives in the city of Boston, not just for people that live in middle-class neighborhoods. I think I can make that case. I hope I can make that case, but we'll know on September 24th.
Again, Bill Walczak, former CEO of the Codman Square Health Center, and now how many $1 million concern is that now?
Shawmut?
Yeah, Codman Square Health Center.
Codman Square Health Center is a $25 million agency, and Shawmut is about $800 million.
Yeah, well, and making his mark, hoping to make his mark in the mayor's race. Of course, the preliminary election in September, the final in November. Top two candidates in the preliminary go on to the final, and as we have been doing, talking to some of the candidates, and we'll continue in the weeks and months ahead. Bill, I want to wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Joe.
You got a lot to say. I hope people are listening, and good luck to you.
Well, I know they're listening to this show, so.
I appreciate it. When we come back with more of the Talk of the Neighborhoods, we'll turn our gaze to an election much closer, just 8 days away now, the special U.S. Senate election. Joining me, Republican Gabe Gomez, and we'll find out his strategy for closing the deal. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, and in this half hour, I'm very pleased to have joining me a very special guest. 8 days from now, we'll find out who the next U.S. Senator is in Massachusetts, replacing John Kerry. One of those candidates looking to step up. He's a successful businessman, former Navy SEAL, making his first bid for public office. Very impressive resume. We're talking about Republican Gabriel Gomez. And Gabriel, thanks so much for coming by and joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Nice to have you here.
I'm honored.
Well, of course, we were talking a little bit about it before we opened the show. If you pulled an upset in the primary, I mean, you maybe didn't think of it that way, but someone who'd never run for office before has shown you had a great appeal. Can you do it again? Can you win this? The polls are all showing your opponent still with a lead.
Oh, absolutely. In the primary, we were the underdog. I ran against two very good men who had long public service records and very distinguished records, and we came out of nowhere. Nobody knew me outside of my town, Cohasset, and out of where I worked at Advent. And we pulled a very impressive victory with over 51% of the vote in a competitive three-way race. And now again, we're the underdog. And I've always been the underdog in my life. I'm a kid who didn't learn English until he went to school. And but I've accomplished a lot of pretty hard things to do, and I've been more than proud of what I've done. And so I consider this another challenge. And I'm confident we're going to be successful on June 25th.
Well, have you developed, of course, a lot of these politicians, and you are now one, whether you ever wanted to be called that or not.
I'm not a career politician.
I hear you, but they develop a comfort level over time because maybe it's just repetition or whatever. Have you developed a comfort level with campaigning and that kind of glad handing? And how have you approached the campaign? You're obviously a very accomplished man and genuine man. How do you let people know that, kind of get that?
Well, I obviously enjoy going out and meeting people. I've enjoyed every trip and every event that we've had throughout the campaign. And I'm just a lot more comfortable now because, after the first 2 or 3 weeks of the campaign and the primary, I just decided, I'm just going to be myself. And it's a lot easier when you're just yourself. So I'm not exactly the most polished, skilled, slick talking politician, because I'm just not who I am. But I just go out there and speak from the heart, speak the truth, and it just comes out a lot easier when you're doing that.
Well, you, in your ads at least, have kind of described yourself as a different kind of Republican, so to speak. And is that by design, or have you always kind of felt yourself a little different than mainstream, whether it's Republicans or any of these politicians?
I think it's just the way I am who I am, and I believe in the core Republican principles of more personal responsibility, more personal freedom, and smaller, more effective government. But I'm a first-generation American. I'm a military vet, served as an aircraft carrier pilot and Navy SEAL, and I've got private sector experience. And I've got some views that aren't always at 100% aligned with the Republican Party, so I view myself as a new kind of Republican, trying to go out there and expand the party, talking about what we stand for as opposed to what we're against, and trying to make it more inclusive as opposed to exclusive. So I'm happy where I stand, and I just hope to make the Republican Party bigger.
Well, of course, you know the numbers as well as anybody. The majority of voters are actually unenrolled here, but the Democratic registration advantage over Republicans is huge. And it's put, the fact of the matter is, there are no, now that Scott Brown is no longer in office, no statewide Republicans elected. How do you change that? Do you have a different formula here than perhaps Republicans in the past? And is it working?
I think
are you getting unenrolled Democrats?
I think it is working. Everywhere we go, the level of enthusiasm is extremely high, and obviously we don't go to a lot of the Republican areas. We go into, there's not a lot of Republican areas in the state anyways, but everywhere we go, the level of enthusiasm from independents and Democrats is extremely high. And I think our message of putting the people before party and politics, which is a key part of this campaign is really resonating. I think there's a lot of difference between me and Congressman Markey, but I think the biggest one is that I've always, from my time in the service, in the Navy, I've always put people and the country before party and politics, and I think we need a change down in D.C. because what you have down in D.C. is just too many career politicians that are just putting the party and politics before the people, and that's what you get when you get down in D.C. right now. There's such a dysfunction down there.
Well, yeah. Again, not to polls are a snapshot in time, and of course. Scott Brown, many people thought he couldn't win either. Looking towards Election Day, how do you close the deal now? What's the key in your mind? I know there's been a number of debates, televised debates. One just recently, and depending upon who you talk to, they're saying kind of inconclusive. But how does Gabe Gomez kind of close the deal like Scott Brown did, or is that not a workable model?
Well, each election is different, each candidate is different. Yeah. I think Scott Brown was a phenomenal senator. I think he's a great man, and but this is a different election and a different opponent. We have another debate tomorrow night at 7 p.m. and the election's next, following Tuesday on June 25th. And we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, and that is going out there and earning the respect of the voters and then earning their vote. And this doesn't go to the person who feels it's entitled to. And I think in the end, the people are going to have a choice. Who do they trust to put the people first before party and politics? And that's what's going to be the question, following between now and the 25th of June. And I think it's a clear choice because there's one of us that's going to put the people before party and politics. One of us has the answers to the problems that are down there. And one of us doesn't want to be down there for 37 years.
There's been some, of course, there's obviously a lot of television advertising now, and there's been some of it's quite negative. Is that, this is a special election, and so the percentage of people that will turn out and vote probably fairly small compared to the general. I guess it depends. But is that falling on deaf ears, the negative stuff, or?
I think. Yeah, he's obviously been able to outspend me because he's been raising money for the last 40 years for a lot of special interest groups and a lot of groups that he oversees and regulates. But the reality is that he has run one of the most cravenly disingenuous kind of attack kind of campaign. Where
how so?
Well, he's a lot of his ads are just completely misleading, and they try to paint me as somebody that I'm not. And I guess that says two things: is that he's trying to scare people. Because I think he's scared. That's why he's bringing in this army of DC people from the head of the DNC to a congressman who can speak Spanish because he doesn't understand Spanish, the Latino community, where I can go in there and speak fluent Spanish and understand the Latino community because I am Latino. Then he brings in President Obama, who I have a lot of respect for, and I mean, I'm honored and humbled that the president would come to Boston because of me. And then he brings in President Clinton, this past weekend, and I guess he's going to bring in Vice President Biden. And look who I'm going out with. Today I was with Mike Milbury, former Bruin, famous coach.
Well, you might be earning more for that, especially on a night like tonight.
Right, and I was just at the TD Garden greeting all the fans coming into Game 3 for the Bruins Blackhawk game, and that's the difference is that he's DC, he's got the army of DC coming in, to basically, I would think that somebody who's been in office for 37 years would be able to defend their own record as opposed to having somebody come up here and try to defend it for them.
Well, talking about that, some interesting stuff has come out in polls, and again, there's snapshots in time, but that in some ways, the most potent weapon in his arsenal is not what he says about you. It's the fear that people have about Republicans in other parts of the country that are in Congress and who would control Congress, and you've said that you'd be a different kind of senator. Are you willing to kind of buck your party on some key positions? Assault weapons ban, no new taxes. And I realize those are oversimplified. Don't get me wrong, but how do you deal with that? How would you deal with it when you're down there? To say no to Mitch McConnell?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm my own person. I'm not beholden to any special interest group, and I'm not beholden to towing the line of the Republican Party. I mean, there's a lot of areas within the Republican Party that I'm not in the mainstream of. I believe that if two people are in love, they should be able to get married. I believe that they should, we should repeal DOMA. A lot of Republicans aren't there on that. I believe that we should have a comprehensive immigration reform bill. I'm with the Gang of 8. I want to make it a Gang of 9 when I get down there, and I hope Senator Warren makes it a Gang of 10 when I get down there. A lot of Republicans are on board with that. I believe that we should have an expanded background check, like the Toomey Manchin bill that didn't pass the Senate a couple months ago. I mean, I'm ashamed that there was only 4 Republicans who voted for that bill. I want to go down there and get more Republicans and more conservative Democrats on that bill, so that bill will make our communities, our schools, and our kids safer. And I also believe in, which a lot of Republicans aren't on board on that one, I also believe that there's global warming, that there's climate change, and that humans have something to do with this. So I don't deny science like some of the Republicans do in my party. I do believe that Democrats deny math when it talks about the budget and our state of our economy. So there's a number of areas that I don't toe the line on the Republican Party. And like I said, I'm not beholden to any group, and I'm my own person. I'm not going to be down there for more than 2 terms, so I'm not going to be worried about getting a re-election. So.
Have you gotten a response from whether I guess not just Democrats, it's independents, unenrolled? Are you getting a good response from them? And
yeah, I mean the amazing response that I get overwhelmingly is that people want to focus on the economy, but they also want somebody who is gonna represent them before the party in politics, and that's why I have a lot of independents, a lot of Democrats coming my way, because they know that I'm going to put the best interest of the people of Massachusetts before any party on the Republicans. They also know that I'm going to go down there and work with both parties.
Some suggestion, there was an article in Commonwealth Magazine, Mass Inc. Today that while you may do well with moderate voters, so to speak, no matter what party, that your views on issues could hurt you with the conservative wing of the party, and go figure, right? What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, they know that I'm a fiscal conservative, and that we're not going to agree on 100% of the issues. Yeah. But I think that I'm obviously their right choice, and I think I'm the right choice for all the people of Massachusetts, actually. So it's for the Republicans, it's for Democrats and Independents.
Well, and the other thing in the polls, not to harp on that, but which I was kind of surprised at, because you're, good-looking, handsome guy. The polling showed that women weren't supporting you in the numbers that you might have thought. What can you do to win?
I think
women?
Yeah, and I would come out tomorrow in the debate. I think it's been very clear that he has tried to paint me as somebody I'm not, and he's tried to paint me as somebody that will take a woman's right to choose away, which is absolutely false. I said that I'm just like Steve Lynch, Congressman Steve Lynch. I'm Catholic, I'm personally pro-life, but Roe v. Wade's been around for 40 years. It's established law, and we have established law here in Massachusetts, and I'm not going down there to change any laws, and now they're going down there to pass any laws that will take a women's right to choose away. And he's been trying to mislead, effectively women on that issue. And we'll get our message out there because, they know when I get my message out there that I'm not going to change any laws and take away a women's right to choose.
Well, the man you're seeking to succeed actually has made his mark so much so that he's now Secretary of State. Of course, we're talking about John Kerry, some very serious and concerning issues, and not the least of which is now reports that the Syrian regime is using chemical weapons against their own people. War and peace has always been a big issue here in Massachusetts as it is now, but we're just getting out of or withdrawing most of our troops now from Afghanistan, have from Iraq. Based on your own personal experience, what should we be doing? Do you support the president's foreign policy, the way he's approaching this? He seemed reluctant to get involved in another engagement. What do you think we should be doing?
Well, I've got a pretty neat perspective on this, having served 9 years, as an aircraft carrier pilot, then as a Navy SEAL commander, and still have a lot of friends that are in the service, especially in the Special Operations Group. And Syria is it's a very unique situation because you've got the Middle East, and you've got Syria is Iran's last ally in the region, and Iran is the biggest threat to peace in the region, as well as I think to the world, because they're developing nuclear weapons, and they're also the largest sponsor of terrorism. And I think that what the president should be doing, and I think he's starting to go that way, is that we should be helping the rebel group that is going to best promote peace and democracy in Syria when they take over. And I think that we need to provide them with armament so they can fight their war. It's not our war, it's their war. So, and I think we need to give them a no-fly zone so that they can combat and be able to effectively deal with the fighter planes that Russia has sent over, and also the troops and the armament and the intel that the Iranians have sent over to Syria. So this is an area where I think
you have no hesitation that we should play a more active role there.
Well, I think that we should, I think the hardest decision that we'll ever make as a senator is on foreign policy in terms of whether we commit troops or not. And this is not an area where I would commit troops. But I also wouldn't leave the Syrian rebels to be left to slaughter. And that's what the fact was going to happen unless we help them out. Because right now they're heavily out-armed and heavily outmanned. And unless we actually provide them with the means to defend themselves, then I think what we're going to see is, Assad remain in power, and you're going to have Iran remain as strong as they are. Now,
amongst those that came to campaign for you, though, is Senator John McCain. Are you simpatico with him on most views? He's seen as a hawk on foreign policy. Do you consider yourself a hawk on foreign policy?
I got a lot.
How would you characterize yourself?
Well, I've got a lot of respect for Senator McCain. Yeah. He's a little bit more senior to me at the Naval Academy. He's a few years before me. And he obviously has a very distinguished career. Just a few. He's got a very distinguished career in the military, obviously. And he's got a very distinguished career, as a bipartisan senator down in the Senate, working across the aisle on a number of issues. But I'm not into labels. I don't consider myself a hawk. I consider myself a pragmatist who's got real-world experience on national security, and I think I bring a different perspective. And I think we need more people that have worn the uniform down in the Senate for a number of reasons. We've had 2 million people serve in the military since 9/11 that have served overseas in a hostile area. 1 million are going to get out of the service in the next 5 years. And, we still live in a very dangerous world. It's not just overseas either. We were reminded a little bit over 2 months ago just how dangerous the world it is here in the United States. It wasn't even our backyard, it was in our front yard there at the Boston Marathon bombing. So I think we would benefit for having more people down there that have actually got a perspective on, on the military and national security, and not learning national security from being in a room, and learning from a book.
Well, and which raises an interesting question, because the other thing that's, of course, recently happened is the revelation that the NSA, the government, has been spying, some would say, on ordinary citizens, looking at their emails or personal communications. You're getting people on both sides, people saying, that's violating civil liberties, and others saying, yes, it might be, but it's worth it for safety. Where do you come down on that issue?
Well, I think that Mr. Snowden's he broke the law, and he needs to be prosecuted. And if he put anybody's lives in danger, I would say that, I I'd call it treason. And there's a fine line between national security and our personal privacy. And I think that unless something rises to an imminent danger or a level of national security level that's high enough, then I think this is a broad brush of the too broad of a sweep of the brush here when you're talking about the NSA, ease and snooping on 110 million Americans. But I don't have access to all the information that the president and the intel community has. So, but on the surface, it looks like I think they've gone too far. And like I said, there's a fine line between national security and our privacy. And I think that invading 110 million people seems like a massive overreach.
And what would you do about it?
Well, I think you have to have an investigation on this, and you have to determine exactly why they went to the extreme level that they did. As I said, unless it's an imminent threat or rises to a national security level that's extremely high, then I don't understand why they would need to go such a broad. We've got the Patriot Act, which gives them access and an ability when there's specific information that they're trying to target. But this seems like a very broad sweep that seems too broad.
Well, and I should say, in fairness, President Obama has not really addressed it so directly, although his national security director said that he is supportive of the actions that were taken. You supported President Obama in the past, and has anything happened since then? Back in 2008, if I understand correctly, anything happened to kind of change your mind since then? You like the direction he's taking the country? You
I look forward to working with President Obama and on the issues that we agree on, like immigration reform and expanded background checks. I look forward to working with him on that and getting things done quickly. On the issues that we don't agree on, I look forward to working with them and hopefully coming to a common sense, balanced approach to a solution that's best for the American people. But I think what's happened, even worse now in the last 6-7 years is that, D.C. is just so broken. You got the IRS targeting groups because of their political beliefs. You've got the Justice Department seizing records of the press. You still don't have any answers on Syria, and now you've got this NSA. So I think the common thread is that there's a lack of transparency down in D.C., and that there's an overbearing kind of arrogant government that's overreaching. And that's why there's so much distrust. And that's why, Congressman Markey, he's been down there for 40 years, and he's contributed, I think, significantly to the dysfunction and the discord and kind of the failure of what people associate D.C. with. So.
How are you going to prevent yourself from being infected by that whole kind of mindset?
Well, I'm not in love with the idea of being a senator. I want to go down there and serve. That's why I'm running. I want to go down there and serve. I've got 4 young kids that are 13 down to 8, and I want to make sure that my kids and everybody else's kids have a chance at the American dream. And that's what I want to go down there and be part of the solution. Like I said, I'm not tied to any special interest group, and I'm not ideologically tied so rigid to one party. And so I look forward to working, obviously with people of both parties down there. And so I don't see myself ever as being, in the back pocket of anybody. I've been independent, my whole life in terms of how I think and believe. But I look forward to going down there and working with both parties.
Well, we want to wish you the best of luck. Again, Gabriel Gomez, if you haven't seen him, of course, there's been plenty of television commercials. There is another debate tomorrow night, but he's the real thing. I ran into him the other night at a parade and walking the same route as me. And well, thank you so much for coming in and joining us. The special U.S. Senate election is, 8 days from tonight, April 25th. If you haven't got it marked on your calendar, please do. It's a very important race. We've had so many special elections lately that people may be overlooking this, but you shouldn't. It's too important to the country. Gabriel Gomez, very well spoken, and what your contribution to the country can't be understated. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You're watching Talking to the Neighborhoods here tonight and every Monday night. We'll be back next week at the same time. Until then, for the entire staff and crew here at BNN TV, I want to thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.